was in the spring of 2009, and I was at the end of a really long, dark journey. I had spent 20 years addicted to drugs and alcohol, and it wasn't just that. I had spent 20 years as a devout sinner. I didn't sin with remorse. I didn't sin with moderation. I sinned in excess, and I sinned with enthusiasm. In all the ways, the 7 deadly sins were appealing to me. And I reached a moment of darkness that was so frightening and so scary that even my twisted and warped consciousness of that time could no longer live inside of this skin. I could not inhabit this body any longer. The pain I had caused other people and I had caused myself was far too great to go another day. And on May 2nd, 2009, I woke up from a very bad party, had a very bad hangover, and I decided that I was not interested in consuming alcohol. And that was the beginning of a very long and beautiful journey that I've been on since that day. One of the first things that I did when I got back to Cookeville from that party, it was a Monday, as I got online and I found out where the nearest meeting was for Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to that meeting and I picked up a chip. It's called a surrender chip. And that meant I had done the first 2 steps of the 12 steps, which I had admitted that I had a problem, that I was powerless, and that I realized that there was a power greater than myself that we in these rooms in this room of church choose to call God, that could restore my sanity. And so I went home that night, and it was the first night I was totally alone. My ex-wife was not anywhere near me, none of my friends. The party was long over. The semester was ending. I was completely alone in my apartment on the west side of Willow Avenue, just a tiny little student-like apartment, a little hovel that I called my home. And I had nothing that stood between me and just going right back out there and just starting that negative cycle all over again, except for that white chip in my pocket and this sliver of an idea that maybe my life could be different. And so I had this opportunity at that moment to pray. And I wanted to do this, the 3rd step of Alcoholics Anonymous. I wanted to make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I didn't know who God was. I had been into Hinduism, into Buddhism, into paganism, into New Age this. I believed in aliens. I didn't believe in anything. I was an atheist. I was an agnostic. And I entertained it all. And I tried everything, but not very well. And the one thing that I remembered always was Jesus. And it was not even, I didn't have to think about it that night because I had this banner. It was like a tapestry. It was like as big as one of these curtains here, as big as this screen. It was hanging across the wall in my kitchen, and it was the Roman or Greek god of wine, Bacchus Dionysus. There's this gigantic picture of my sin and of my distorted worldview right there in front of me. And I was sitting there, and I'd been waiting all night to pray because I didn't want to pray. I was scared to pray, so I did everything but pray. I lit candles like we did tonight. I put on some really relaxing music, and I was doing the breathing thing, trying to calm myself down and get up the guts to do what I had to do. And I knew at that point there was nothing standing between me and worse than I had experienced. I'd had what we call a bottom. And I sat there in my room that night, and I looked at that banner, and I said to myself, well, I can't exactly pray to you. Mm-hmm. And I looked to my right, and I have a picture of this in my room at home today. And this is a depiction of Jesus by an artist called Alex Grey. Now, Alex Grey, you've probably not heard of him. His art usually appears on rock and roll album covers. And I turned to this picture of Jesus. Now, Alex Grey described this picture as the resurrected Jesus. And I said, I guess I'll pray to you. And at that moment, everything changed. The temperature of the room changed. The condition of my heart changed. And I don't know how real it was in the sense that some people call real, but I heard the voice of Jesus say to me, I've been waiting for you to come home. And where have you been? for so long. Now, I woke up the next morning and I wrote a poem that I don't have with you to share tonight, but it was about my misunderstanding of grace, because I wanted free grace. Free grace sounded like a really good idea to me, but I didn't want to confess. I didn't want to admit my part in the wrong of the world. I didn't want to confess my sins. I wanted Easter without Good Friday, is what I wanted. And I realized that day that I needed both. That I needed God's sacrifice for me, that He made 2,000 years ago on Good Friday. And I needed His forgiveness that He offered up freely for me. And so I confessed my sins that day. And I've been praying to Jesus every day since. Like Paul says, morning, noon, and night. And I don't care if you pray for touchdowns or pray for a bigger bank account. Because I realized that everything, well, almost everything, that I've gone looking for in other religions and in other experiences, everything that I'd sought in terms of intimacy and relevance and reverence, everything I sought in terms of elevation and revelation, all of this and so much more than I was looking for was already here. And God is described in the Bible as a unifying, redeeming, and forgiving force for all things for all time. Back on this question of public versus private, the singer Johnny Cash, I don't know if you all know him, but his struggle with addiction and his coming out of that is something I identify with strongly. He talks about his continuing attraction to the 7 deadly sins, that I can identify with his struggle. He was famous, as you know, and he was faced once with a decision. He talks about this in his biography, whether or not he should profess his Christian faith on national television. He said he knew it would turn a lot of people off. They would think he was proselytizing. But then when he was finally confronted by a fan by a direct question about his spirituality, he realized that he had no choice, he said, but to declare, to tell the truth. And he said, his record sales went down, and the most negative reaction he got was from other Christians, because they didn't like the way he did it, or he was the wrong denomination, or they couldn't then use him for their particular aims. But I really identify with that today, because I was shameless in the things that I did before 2009, and I don't want to be ashamed today of the changes that God has made in my life. And I think I misunderstood God for somebody else. God's not rigid, God's not repressed, and God came as a real person to the real world, offering liberation and levity. God came to be one of us, to walk and talk and feast and fellowship with us. God came to serve the selfish and save the sinners and the drunks. So, while my tent revival inside was deeply personal and private, even though I share it with you all tonight, I can declare that the name of Jesus will be the one I say at the tent revival that is the world. A world in need of love today, as much as it has always been. Amen.